What makes engineering so difficult? I'm quite far from applying to university, but I'm still looking around at potential careers. I've heard that engineering is a very difficult degree, but what makes engineering difficult? I think with medicine, you have to understand a lot of concepts from different fields, such as biology, chemistry, learn the ability to communicate well with people, both in a written and verbal aspect, and memorize a lot of information from those fields. Math is very difficult because you're learning a lot of very abstract concepts and writing proofs. But what makes engineering difficult? By the way, I do understand that it's a difficult engineer, but I'm asking what exactly makes it difficult. Thank you. So I would say that engineering is difficult because it is combining both of those things. And you're having to all the things that you listed for medicine are things that you have to do as an engineer. You have to learn a lot of different concepts, and then you have to learn how to communicate them in a written and verbal aspect. Engineers need to be written and verbal and communicating. I mean, you work. I can think of a very short list of jobs that you can do as an engineer where you can not have to talk to people and not be communicative. It's a very short list. And memorize a lot of information. Yeah, engineering, there's a lot of things you have to learn, memorize. But on top of that, then you have to learn how to solve a lot of problems and how to apply those things that you've learned, those broad concepts that you've learned, and how to apply them and solve specific problems and general problems. I'd say that, biology, medicine, there's a lot of memorization, and then you've learned it, and then and there's a little bit of problem solving, but engineering is a lot, is, in my opinion, a higher level of problem solving. You take say, for example, you take a business class and you're doing an exam, you have a business case, and you have to apply it, your problems. But most of my classes that I took in business, is more multiple choice memorization type questions. But every once in a while there were application type questions, like in my economics program. But I just say that engineering, you're constantly doing that, and you got just so many different things to learn, so many very, very, very difficult broad concepts, and then you've learned the general concept, and then in your exam your professor has asked you to take the concept that you've learned and then apply it in a completely different way than the ways that you've applied it or learned it in your exams. I mean, there's never like any repetition of this doing the same type of problem the exact same way whenever you're doing it from homework from exam. It's very, very different. Another thing that makes engineering difficult is the quantity of labs. I'll just say that it's just a lot. I mean, from my experience, my lab classes were 1 credit hour classes, which meant that you're in lab for 1 hour a week. But I wasn't actually in lab for 1 hour a week. I was in the lab for 3 hours a week, and it was only 1 credit hour, so that I could afford the engineering program. So effectively, I would be registered for, say, 17 hours, but I had 3 labs, so add another 6. I was effectively taking 23 credit hours at one time. And the same concept of, for every hour in class, it's 3 hours outside of class. Yeah, I was spending an extra 9 hours outside of a class on a 1 credit hour class that, so it was just, there's a lot to learn. It's a lot of problem solving, a lot of application, not much you have to memorize things, you have to understand the general concepts, and then a lot of application and a lot of really trying to stretch your brain and trying to apply these things in ways that you may not have seen them exactly in that way before. And then it's very tedious. It's very, there's just a lot to do. And you have to be really precise whenever you're solving problems, or else you can't really BS your way through it. You really have to be very precise whenever you're going through it. So that's kind of an all over the place answer. I will argue that the engineering degree is going to be the most challenging degree at any university you go to. It's just, and that's just my take on why it's the most difficult. If anybody disagrees with me, I'd like to hear them explain why their degree program is more difficult than engineering. But I think that engineering kind of takes all the most difficult aspects of any degree program, and then you're putting them all together. The notion that you don't have to do any communication or writing or any super creative things as an engineer is just not the case. All those other things are rolled into an engineering program. But yeah, engineering's tough. It's a lot of coursework, a lot of mandatory coursework. You'll see that that there's more engineering coursework is generally more credit hours than a lot of other majors. It's a lot of time. That doesn't even count the credits that are labs that should actually be 3 credits instead of 1 if you're in the U.S. And again, having to learn the concepts, apply them, and then going into an exam and having to apply them in a completely different way than you've ever applied it before. That's what makes engineering tough. And that's what makes engineers great problem solvers and great employees doing whatever. So, yeah, engineering's great. I recommend it to anybody. If you can stick through it, then you can do anything with your career. And that's why I did it. So, all right. Well, that's the podcast. If you like the podcast, share it with somebody. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, give it 5 stars. If you're listening on Anchor or anything, just share it, repost it, like it, follow it, download it, anything like that. That definitely helps me out. If you want to support the podcast, I told you how to do that earlier. But again, this is not something I do for money. It's because I am passionate about other people developing their careers. So if you have a question and you want my my solicited opinion instead of all of these unsolicited opinions, write into engring.success@gmail.com. That's engr, just like it would show up in your course catalog, ing.success@gmail.com, and I will do my best to give you my take.
Never losing focus because I ain't chasing payments. Still playing in the basement while I'm working on arrangements. They heard the kid in 50 countries, thank God that's amazing. But I'd rather thank Spotify, they put me on the station.